In this world, everyone's fate, purpose, and future achievements are written in a book of their fate. But what would happen if you noticed that your book of fate is filled with empty pages? How would you live your life if you know that you have no role in your own story? We follow the story of X, a young orphan boy who lives with his uncle and aunt. One day, he looks at his book of fate and asks them why is it empty. They immediately get startled. His uncle's eyes become wide open as his jaw drops, and his aunt drops to her knees as a soulless body. X has no fate or role in his life, they think. Despite having no role in his life, X tries to do his best to help his uncles in their job to deliver vegetables to the town. One day, on his way, he meets a crying girl named Cinderella. He approaches her and helps her, and she becomes his first friend. Kids usually bully and mock him after puffing their chests because they have a fate. Unlike X, who looks unfazed as if he's devoid of purpose, he usually meets Cinderella, who is always scolded and treated badly by her stepmother. She tells him that her fate is to marry a prince she'll meet at the ball and live happily ever after. However, she doesn't believe in the book. X quickly gets up with the warmest smile on his face and clenches his fist. As someone who has no fate, he will make sure to make her and others' fate become a reality. He later finds a wooden sword and decides to practice as a swordsman. Some days later, the stall owner reveals her husband was attacked in the woods and weeps since such an incident wasn't in her book of fate. X tries to sympathize with her, but she snaps at him, shouting he won't understand since he is role-less, even making her kid cry. That night, while training, X encounters Rihanna trapped by a tree and gets surrounded by some villains. Although she tells him to run away, he refuses to give up as he forces his body to get up as he musters the courage to fight back, stating that he has no role but he still can do his best to save someone. Rihanna hands him a bookmark of guidance with instructions. He then transforms into a hero with a real sword and blitzes through the group of villains easily. Rihanna reveals she wants to find the story zone's main character. X reveals that the main character must be Cinderella. Rihanna explains that she is in danger from the Chaos Teller, a creature that destroys story zones. Just then, people begin transforming into villains around town with Loki in the middle of it. X quickly rushes to Cinderella's aid, but Rihanna orders Shane and Tao to stop him. It turns out Cinderella's fairy godmother is the Chaos Teller working with Loki because some Cinderellas of the past didn't get their happily ever after despite getting married to the prince. The group asks X to show his bookmark, and their jaws immediately drop when they see he has a wild crest, a crest that allows him to connect with any hero he desires to. They arrive in the middle of town and transform into their heroes. In X's case, he now transforms into Alice. They manage to clear the first wave of villains, but on their way to the castle, a fresh group attacks. They get surrounded, so Rihanna goes ahead to help X, who ran ahead. In the hall, they encounter Loki, who addresses Rihanna as the Princess of Tuning since she tunes the story zone back to normal. When the others arrive, Loki flees as he is outnumbered. They open the door to find a party of villains, as well as the fairy godmother, who reveals she is fighting for Cinderella's happiness. She then transforms into a villain and orders her underlings to attack. As the rest of the group engages the villains, X rushes towards the fairy godmother. He gets bombarded with all manner of spells and is knocked down. Luckily, he is healed and restored by Rihanna, so he gets back on his feet. He maneuvers through the spells and uses Alice's labyrinth combo to defeat the foe. Afterward, Rihanna begins the tuning and resets the story zone back to normal, cleansing the zone and making sure it gets a happy ending. The next day, X realizes his purpose. As someone who has no fate, he must be the one to help others accomplish their fates, and decides to join the party on their adventure. On their journey, they find a girl frozen in fear as a villain attacks her. Luckily, she is saved by X, who quickly defeats the demon before transforming back to his original form. Rihanna uses her hero's healing ability to keep the human alive, and they head to the nearby village. The human, who seems not to remember that he transformed into a villain, reveals that the content of his book of fate is becoming twisted, and the group realizes it must be the work of a Chaos Teller. The village elder draws their attention to the fact that Red Riding Hood has still not been found. She narrates the tale of the Red Riding Hood, where she gets tricked by a wolf who goes to eat her grandmother before lying in wait to devour her. A man interrupts the conversation, revealing it is his fate to save the Red Riding Hood from the wolf's stomach. But his inability to find Red Riding Hood makes the villagers panic, so Rihanna's group decides to intervene. The group then splits into two, with X and Rihanna finding a scared Red Riding Hood in a cave. They head back to Red Riding Hood's grandmother's house. Inside, they don't find the grandmother. Instead, Shane asks why a 1-week-old bread in her basket isn't moldy, or why the wine isn't full. Red Riding Hood then reveals herself to be the Chaos Teller while setting the house on fire. Although they manage to escape unburnt, she then summons her villain minions. She argues that everyone didn't show her love and lied to her before also transforming into a wolf ready to attack. They all summon their different heroes and begin the battle with the villains. They easily defeat the villains one after the other, but Red Riding Hood simply respawns them. Tao then uses his Goliath hero to clear a path straight for Red Riding Hood to allow X to attack her. He is soon overpowered by Red Riding Hood and her fire attacks and is knocked down. The others quickly provide support, and when Rihanna heals X and recovers his mana, she makes sure to defeat the Red Riding Hood with consecutive strikes from her lance. After the battle, Rihanna uses her power to return the story zone to normal, so that everyone can return to their typical lives. They continue their journey to the Fog of Silence, the passage between different story zones. Shane explains that only those such as themselves with a blank book of fate can travel between story zones. They discover the zone is collapsing and are instantly welcomed by some villains. They are joined by a knight called Don Quixote who starts calling X Sancho, stating that he is his master, and they need to protect the townsfolk from the villains. Don Quixote leads the group to his village and leaves them in the care of Dulcinea. Dulcinea narrates the tale of an old man who believes himself to be the knight destined to save the people. On hearing the story, they surmise that Don Quixote is the main character, and immediately move to investigate the problem. The alarm of an enemy attack is sounded and Don Quixote begs everyone to take up arms to defend the city. Together they manage to push back the villains, and Don Quixote is finally hailed as a hero. Later that night, X has encountered Loki. He reveals that main characters like Don Quixote are simply puppets with no will. Just when he reveals himself, he bids X goodbye just before Rihanna arrives. In the church, Dulcinea explains that she is not a real person but a creation of Don Quixote's fantasies. She adds that Don Quixote's fantasies can warp reality, and it began when he thought of a windmill as a monster. Then the villains began to appear. The next day, a windmill villain appears in the village, creating a tornado with its blades so everyone but Don Quixote takes cover. However, the tornado's intensity increases and blows him away. With Don Quixote down, the group transforms into their respective heroes to fight. When they attack, it is all for nothing as the wind acts like a barrier keeping them away from it. X then summons transforms using a Red Riding Hood wild crest that gives him her fire abilities, which he uses to defeat the villain. With the villain defeated, Rihanna begins to reset their world while erasing both the villains and Dulcinea from everyone's memories. The group soon arrives at an incredibly cold forest where they find a girl collapsed in the snow. They find a cottage where the blind owner lets them in for the night. When the girl awakens, she talks about her companion, Kai, who was taken away by the Snow Queen. The group decides to accompany Gerda to the Snow Queen's castle. When they arrive at the Ice Castle, Kai comes out to reveal he left because his book of fate ties him with the Snow Queen. When the Snow Queen notices the intruders, she breaks the ice, making them fall into a hole. They encounter Kai again beneath the palace, but he refuses to leave. He says he made a contract with the Snow Queen to lift a curse Gerda had. He then triggers a memory from their past and breaks the curse. The Snow Queen arrives to take her hostage back, and the group then transforms into a new set of heroes to begin the battle. The Queen's blizzard attack renders them immobile, but when she switches to kill them with her icicles, they go for a counterattack. Although the ice does not affect her, Shane ends the battle by firing a powerful arrow at her. Just then, the blind lady who gave them shelter reveals herself to be the mastermind, the one who wants to help sad characters break from their fate in the story zone. Immediately, Loki appears and addresses the lady as Curly, the priestess of chaos, before leaving with her. The group continues their journey and soon arrives at a desert story zone so hot, Rihanna passes out from the heat. A boy called Aladdin appears and offers her water while stealing her walled garden kingdom. Rihanna slaps him in anger. Aladdin is infatuated with her boldness. He then reveals he was tricked by an evil wizard and trapped in a cave, where he found a magic lamp with a genie whose powers he used to escape and become rich. But the Sultan stole his lamp, so he is broke again. He mentions that his book of fate states that he is to get the lamp back and marry a beautiful princess, revealing that he's the zone's main character. The group notice the story zone will collapse soon and they rush to retrieve his lamp back. Rihanna collapses from stress. When X asks why she pushes herself so much, Tao explains that Rihanna wants revenge on Loki for destroying her home. They suddenly notice a horde of villains close, so everyone goes to fight while leaving Rihanna with Aladdin. However, when a stray villain gets close, Aladdin tries to protect her, shielding her with his body. The others arrive only to watch a dying Aladdin reveal he is happy he chose his own fate. After burying him, they decide to find the magic lamp to bring Aladdin back to life. In town, they encounter Loki yet again, and when Rihanna blames Aladdin's death on him, Loki uses it against her by accusing her of taking the people's freedom because of her anger. The Sultan summons them to a room using the power of the genie and uses it to battle them. Rihanna leads the charge but quickly retreats from the genie's fire attack. Next, Shane attacks with a spell that he evades by splitting in two. When they provoke the genie, he bombards them with a series of attacks that create a cover for Rihanna to attack the Sultan. The Sultan attacks with his magic staff. The Sultan is defeated and the genie disappears. Sadly, their plan is shattered as the lamp got destroyed, leaving Rihanna with no choice but to tune the story zone before it finishes collapsing. In tears, Rihanna resets the story zone and returns everything as it should be. For their next adventure, they meet Mad Hatter and March Hare, who try to invite Rihanna to their Mad Tea Club's tea party. Alice arrives with her soldiers to arrest them. Rihanna, who is a big fan of Alice, gushes over her, but this Alice has no sense of adventure. In town, they find Alice and her vice punishing a villager for spacing out during work, and decide to confront her. But she declares she was chosen by Lady Heart, the Red Queen, to become mature rather than a child obsessed with fantasies. Rihanna then brings up her embarrassing past and how she ended up in Wonderland by chasing a rabbit through a hole. Alice gets embarrassed, allowing March Hare and the Mad Hatter to kidnap her. They look for her and find her in a cave, where Rihanna manages to convince her to return by promising to make her cookies. The tales of Rihanna's adventure make Alice open up, but they are soon interrupted by the White Rabbit, who abducts Mad Hatter and takes him to the Queen of Hearts trial, meaning a sure death sentence. Alice then decides to lead the group on a rescue mission. In the palace, they are surrounded as it turns out everything was a plot made by Alice to capture them. They soon find that the Queen is the Chaos Teller who has filled Alice's head with lies. The Queen immediately sentences Rihanna and the others to and comes down to confront them. She uses her heart magic to attack them in succession and knocks everyone down. Rihanna and X transform into new heroes, and this time, Rihanna blocks each of her attacks and at the same time, creates an opening for X to deal the finishing blows. Rihanna carries out her cleansing ritual, but it doesn't work surprisingly. Just then, Mad Hatter transforms into a beast called the Jabberwock while Alice is kidnapped by Loki. The Jabberwock and Loki then begin their attack by splitting the group into two with a wall on fire. Rihanna and X escape and manage to regroup with Shane and Tao again, and she starts to recall the Jabberwock, referring to the place as the Looking Glass Story Zone. Mad Hatter walks into the conversation. They explain that they want to defeat the Red Queen, so he volunteers to draw for them a map to her palace. Getting to the Red Queen's castle, they are welcomed by Loki and Curly, who have Alice. Curly reveals again that she desires to free those with fates as well as those with blank books who are faced with the worst kind of suffering. X tries to prove her wrong by revealing everyone has feelings, and this leads to a stalemate. Loki summons the Jabberwock to battle on his behalf. Jabberwock states that when he absorbs Alice, he would become the main character of the story zone. Shane aims for the Jabberwock's eye, blinding him so he becomes powerless against Rihanna's attack. With the Jabberwock defeated, Loki reveals his wild crest and a blank book. He transforms into a form of Aladdin called Chaos Aladdin. He makes clones of himself and attacks the group with a forceful blast that blasts them away. However, X, looking at Rihanna's face, reminds her about his promise and hears a voice telling him to stand up and call his name. He gets up fired up by this new motivation and calls forth his new hero, Ludwig Grimm, a legendary storyteller. He soon shows his overwhelming power as he slashes the Jabberwock with one hand on his pocket, and thereafter faces off with Loki. Loki can only express shock that X can connect with an unseen hero. When Loki creates his clones, X summons a skill that rains donuts, cookies, and candy until there is nothing left of the enemy. With Loki defeated, Alice is released from her curse and Rihanna tunes the story zone as it should be. Watch this next video. See you on the next one.